welcome to our webinar, Child Support 101. We are very pleased that you're able to join us today. My name is Rochelle Finsland. I'm a program director at NCSL, and I manage our work on child support policy. So today's webinar is just going to be, as the title indicates, a basic overview of state child support programs and how legislators can be involved in setting child support policy that will help states improve their collections and ultimately improve the well-being of children. So today's webinar will include a basic overview of child support from Vicki Tureski, who is the Commissioner of Child Support at the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. Followed by her remarks, we will hear from Arizona State Senator Linda Gray, who will give her perspective on child support from the legislative angle. And at the end, there will be time for some questions. Actually, Glyme, would you let people know how they could submit questions as we go along? And then at the end, we will take time to answer those, but feel free to submit those as people are speaking. So, Glyme, could you give the information on how to do that in the chat box?
Certainly. If you would like to submit a question or comment at any time during the webinar, you may use the chat box located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the send button.
Great. Thank you. So first of all, I just want to introduce our speakers and give a quick overview of NCSL, and then I'll turn it over to Vicki. So Vicki Tureski is, as I mentioned, the Commissioner in the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. In her role as Commissioner, she oversees all state and tribal child support programs. Ms. Tureski has 25 years of experience as a public administrator and is a nationally recognized expert in family policy. She's been instrumental in efforts to boost child support payments to families and to establish realistic child support policies that encourage fathers to work and play an active parenting role. Welcome, Vicki. Senator Linda Gray from Arizona has been in the legislature since 1996 and chaired the Public Safety and Human Services Committee and was vice chair of the Education Committee. She also chaired the Joint Committee on Domestic Relations. She has been involved in child support and family law policy and is widely acknowledged as one of the Arizona Legislature's foremost experts on education and family policy. We're pleased to have her with us today. Welcome, Senator Gray. So before we start, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about NCSL's work in child support and how we can help legislators and staff address some of the challenges facing their state child support programs. So for those who are not familiar, NCSL is the National Conference of State Legislatures, and we are a bipartisan organization representing state legislators and state legislative staff from all 50 states and the territories. We provide research and technical assistance on state policies. We lobby on behalf of states before Congress, and we also provide trainings to legislatures on legislative processes and provide other resources to help legislators be effective and successful policymakers. We cover the entire range of issues that you would find in a state capital, including child support. So we are here to provide you, the legislators and staff, with the latest research, connect you with peers in other states who are doing innovative and interesting things in their programs, convene and facilitate meetings with other stakeholders and experts in the field. And we can do all of that with the help of technology like we're doing today on this webinar, and we also have resources to actually come to your state and provide on-site support. So we hope that you will reach out to us in the future. So with that quick introduction on NCSL, I would like to turn it over to Vicki Tureski to begin the real substance of today's conversation and provide the 101 on child support and how it gets collected, how the feds and the states interact with one another in the child support arena, and how state policymakers in particular can play such a critical role in helping children receive the financial support that they need to succeed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vicki and let her explain child support.
Thank you, Rochelle. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today. I want to talk about child support, which is one of your larger human services programs, but one that is not always well understood. It's a complex program, and I'm here to talk about why child support, why focus on child support. Our basic job is to ensure that children receive the financial support of both parents, even when the child lives apart from one of the parents. We establish legal fatherhood. We set the amount of money that the non-custodial parent is to pay to the child, and we transfer the income from the non-custodial parent to the child. The child is our primary concern rather than either parent. And this role of ensuring that children have the financial support of both parents is critical in a world where the majority of children born to mothers under 30 now are born outside of marriage, and where parents are not necessarily living together at any point during the child's upbringing. But we've come to understand very clearly that child support is about more than collecting money. It is an opportunity to encourage non-custodial parents to stay involved with their children and to reinforce positive, less conflictual relationships between the parents. We're also cognizant that the child support program is one of 3 systems that systematically reach low-income and disconnected men. And so it's an opportunity for us to work with the Veterans Administration, prisons, employment programs, and other programs and services for low-income and disengaged men. The mission of the Child Support Program certainly has evolved in the last 40 years that it's been in existence. We started out as a welfare cost recovery program, but that primary mission had faded many years ago, and our primary mission today is family support. We're one of the big 3 income supplement programs for low-income single-parent families, a fact that surprises most policymakers and, frankly, most citizens in the state. We do not have very many families who are actively receiving TANF cash assistance. Only 13% of our caseload involves families who are currently receiving cash assistance. However, we do serve many low-income families for whom child support is a primary source of income. Nearly all of the families in our caseload have modest means, and 2/3 of those families are below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Nearly all, upwards of 90% of the families in our caseload are working families with a limited ability to support themselves and their family and all of their household expenses. The Child Support Program lifts 1 million people out of poverty every year, and it reduces the need for public assistance. Child support is a public service that transfers private income, parental income, to children. Who participates in the program? Well, there are 17 million kids who participate in the program. That's 1 in 4 kids around the country and 1 in 2 poor children. Those kids have parents who either separated or divorced or who never married in the first place, and 39% of those parents were never married. And 17% of custodial parents are fathers. Typically, we think about custodial parents as mothers, and most are, but a growing number of custodial parents are fathers rather than mothers. And some children have 2 non-custodial parents. They're being raised by their grandmother or another relative or in foster care, and in that situation, they have 2 non-custodial parents. Turning now to slide 5, I wanted to show you a picture of how child support stacks up in terms of the number of children participating in a range of income support and social welfare programs. And you'll see that child support is one of the big 3 income support programs, along with Medicaid and SNAP. But again, the difference between child support and other social welfare programs is that we transfer private parental resources to children. It is not public assistance, although it's a public service. Child support represents a lot of money for families when they receive it. And for poverty level, poor single-parent families with custody of their children, child support is 38% of the family's income. That compares to 36% these days of the custodial parent's earnings. So there's a few points to make about this. One is that child support is the largest source of income for families that are receiving child support when they're poor and when child support's coming in the door. The second point is that most children in families who receive child support are being supported primarily by their parents, primarily by their mothers and fathers, not by public assistance, even when they're poor. On average, three-fourths of family income is coming either through the mother's earnings or the father's earnings, represented through child support. Privately supported, children supported by their own parents for the most part, even when they're poor. And the third is that the evidence is that child support is in many ways an alternative to, or a primary source of support for children as an alternative to TANF and other public assistance. The evidence is that when families are getting child support, they have less need of TANF, they use TANF less. It is only when child support is not coming in the door that families are more likely to use TANF assistance. And often that TANF assistance it's always temporary, but often it is transitional as a family structure changes and before child support starts coming in. The child support, unlike most assistance programs, public assistance programs, is a lifetime commitment. Non-custodial parents, both parents, have the obligation to support their children throughout their childhood as they grow up. And so we often have a relationship with both parents and the child for 18 or even 21 years of the child's growing up period. So that's sort of who we are, who we serve. We think of ourselves as a successful, performance-driven program. We measure our performance. States are all accountable for achieving results on 5 specific performance elements that states participated in developing, and Congress now has put into law. Part of federal funding to states is based on state performance on these 5 measures. I've provided some very basic data about child support, about our performance numbers, also about our basic metrics. We collect, as a national program, we collect over $27 billion per year. And the cost for collecting those $27 billion is $5.7 billion, including both federal, state, and local contributions to state to the program spending. So you can see right away that this is a cost-effective program. We collect $5.12 for every $1 of federal, state, local, tribal money that goes into the program. In other words, public dollars are leveraging those private child support dollars. We have the job of establishing legal fatherhood for children, and our paternity rate within our caseload is 99% on average across the country. We are establishing paternity almost universally within our caseload. And that is the legal prerequisite to establishing a child support obligation, an order. And there we are setting child support orders in 81% of our cases, a far cry from how the picture looked at the time of welfare reform in 1996, where about half of cases had a child support order in place. So again, 80% of our cases now have orders in place, the prerequisite to collecting child support. And when we have that order in place, cases are receiving collections in 70% of the time. So 80% of cases have a support order, 70% of those cases are receiving collections throughout the year. Our on-time collection rate, one of the performance measures for states, is 62%. That means we're collecting 62% of the support that is owed on time every month. And some of that has to do with our ability to enforce, to find the money, to collect the money, and to get it paid into the family's hands on time. Part of it has to do, frankly, with the level of the support order. And what we're seeing around the country is a real sea change in how we approach establishing support orders. It used to be that states and courts set orders high, and parents could often not meet those orders, and so they were not meeting their full obligations every month. Around the country, we are setting those orders more realistically based on actual income and getting better results because of it. We're collecting about 62% of back payments that were not paid on time as well, and it's the same situation where debt has accumulated in some cases, sometimes based on an order that was unrealistic to begin with, sometimes based on periods of unemployment or incarceration, sometimes based on, an unwillingness to pay child support and evading responsibilities. So there are a number of reasons why debt builds up in a case, but the most common reasons have to do with inflated orders and long spells of unemployment or incarceration. Child support is a performance-driven program, as I said. It also represents a successful public-private partnership involving the federal government, the state government, county governments, tribal governments, employers, financial institutions, insurance companies, and a host of other private and public partners, all oriented towards getting support to kids. Our job at the federal level is, first of all, to provide you with federal financial participation so that states can effectively operate their child support programs. We provide federal matching funds at a 66% rate, and when you add our performance incentive funds into that mix, it's a 70% effective federal share of costs being paid at the federal level. For tribes, there is a somewhat different funding formula, but comparable. And in addition to providing money, we at the federal office provide policy guidance, training, technical assistance. We audit data that goes into determining performance incentive payments, and that data has a high level of accuracy in our program. And, of course, overall oversight to ensure that states are following federal and state laws. In addition to that oversight and funding role, we conduct direct locate and enforcement activities. In other words, the federal government also is directly finding parents and enforcing support and then passing that information and that money back to states and counties to finish the job, so to speak. We for example, offset federal tax refunds. We, upon state request, suspend or deny passports. We do data matching with financial institutions that are in multiple states and so forth. We operate the Federal Parent Locator Service, which is a series of databases and matching authorities, and includes the National Directory of New Hires, kind of a key database for the federal government, both to facilitate child support enforcement and, frankly, to provide other programs with income eligibility verification. And then finally, we do provide some time-limited competitive grants, not very many, but some, to help, for example, help states set up employment programs for non-custodial parents. States and their subdivisions and tribes have the job of doing all the rest, which is which is everything from establishing paternity and support orders, finding non-custodial parents and their money, collecting that support, and cooperating in intergovernmental enforcement, and making sure that at the end of the day, families, wherever they live, are getting the support that has been collected on their behalf. In addition to the federal government and state and tribal governments, a key partner in child support enforcement is employers. And we could not enforce child support at the level that we do without employers being totally supportive of our mission of collecting child support. 70% of child support is collected through employers, and that is specifically through payroll withholding. Employers also provide us with information at the state level, and it's passed to the federal level, on newly hired employees, on health insurance benefits, and then other kinds of payouts that the employer might make. So we're establishing orders. We are collecting it primarily through income withholding and other enforcement tools for one specific goal, and that is to ensure reliable child support payments for children. We have really shifted away from the idea that a one-time payment is good enough. Instead, we are looking for steady, consistent payments for children as they grow up, so that families can budget and so that children have a consistent financial and hopefully emotional involvement of both parents. Support orders are set in different ways. The majority of states use courts. Their courts set the child support order obligation, but in a substantial number of states, about a third, administrative agencies set the support order. All states are required to follow income guidelines in setting support orders, and those guidelines are developed at the state level. Every state has a different but similar set of child support guidelines. The child support program and more specifically child support orders cover health care as well as financial support, and states increasingly have been using early intervention strategies to work with both parents to set an order because the evidence shows that engaging with both parents early on increases the chances of child support payments, particularly for parents who are not steadily employed. We're also seeing new inroads on problem-solving courts and tying child support payments and parenting time procedures together. Not legal rights. These are separate rights, child support payments and parenting time, but putting the procedure, coordinating the procedures so that parents can deal with both aspects of living apart but having a child in common. Moving on to slide 13, we have a number of enforcement tools. We have more tools than we could wish for. I think we've been very fortunate that Congress and state legislatures have given us this authority. Some of these authorities are at the federal level, some at the state level, some are required in every case, some are optional in a particular case, although every state must have the authority to use them. It's also important that we keep orders in sync and accurate over time, and states are required to review and adjust those orders periodically. We have the job of establishing medical support orders, as I mentioned earlier, and historically we've focused on private coverage through the non-custodial parent's employer. We are interested in continuing to do that, but at the same time looking to increase children's health coverage through private as well as public coverage to ensure that health care needs of children living apart from one parent are covered. And we are in the process of updating our medical support policy. A big part of what we do at the federal office and what each and every state does is enforce child support across jurisdictional lines, interstate enforcement, and frankly, international enforcement. All states must implement the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act, which provides us with a common basis of kind of rules of the road, which includes the goal of establishing one support order that governs the case, even if one parent lives in one state and another parent and child lives in another state. Now, in a perfect world, the non-custodial parent is available to the child. His or her whereabouts are known. He or she has money. Paternity is not an issue. The non-custodial parent is working, and we are able to collect child support every month. Child support works when there's a job. It works pretty well. When it doesn't work as well is in more complicated cases where the non-custodial parent is unknown, or the location is unknown, or the assets and income can't be found, or there are no assets and income to speak of, where paternity has not been established, or where the parents have an interstate situation, they live in different states, or where there's problems in the family relationships beyond separation, where domestic violence or parental disconnection is an issue. And again, when there's no job, the case does not always pay reliably. It usually does not pay reliably. And when we look at the mounting child support debt, unpaid child support that's accumulated over the years, that's a big number. Almost all of that money, 70% of that money, is owed by non-custodial parents who do not have stable jobs, who have multiple barriers to work, who may have served a prison term or two, and where, frankly, most of the money is uncollectible. Some of it's collectible, and we work hard to collect it, but much of it is not collectible, and it is a debt that has meaning to both parents, where the custodial parent and child really need the money, but where the non-custodial parent does not have the means to pay it all off. And so in the 75% of cases where there's a job and we're collecting, debt accumulation is minimal. But when in the 25% of cases where the non-custodial parent has no stable job, we are looking at other kinds of strategies besides strict enforcement to resolve barriers to non-payment. Early intervention strategies, making sure the order is right-sized, and in some cases writing off that uncollectible child support debt owed to the state. And this brings us to what we call our so-called bubble chart, which is that picture on slide 20, which shows our child support program in the middle, our basic job of obtaining child support for kids, but also showing areas where we intersect with other programs where we can help address some of those barriers to non-payment by addressing paternal engagement and economic stability of both parents, for example. We are flagging for you 5 evidence-based tools to increase regular, reliable child support payments as children grow up. They include setting the order at the right level based on non-custodial parents' actual ability to pay child support, their actual income, debt reduction, distributing child support to families rather than using that money to recover welfare costs. The evidence is strong that when the state retains child support to repay welfare costs, instead of using that money as the father or mother's support of their child, in other words, treating child support as support for children rather than repayment of welfare costs, that strategy of making sure that the children are benefiting from that money increases non-custodial parents' payments and increases the number of non-custodial parents who are willing to pay. It increases child care satisfaction when that money is coming in reliably. It decreases underground employment. And both parents have expressed in survey data that it is critically important that the money benefit children and not be used to repay welfare benefits. In addition, parenting time, we mentioned that earlier, where we can resolve strategies to coordinate those systems so that we can resolve parenting time at the same time we resolve child support. Now, this happens normally in a divorce proceeding. The divorce decree covers both aspects. Where we're focused here is in situations where the parents never married and where there is no clear pathway for non-custodial parents to establish parenting time, visitation, access to the child. And then finally, employment services. And I wanted to point out that a number of states have employment programs, at least at a local level. Texas and New York have conducted rigorous research evaluations, finding that employment programs boost collections and that those effects of increased employment and collections last over time. OCSC here at the federal level is launching a major non-custodial parent employment demonstration program to see if we can replicate those results. And then I've included maps on the next two slides that show states where there is at least one local work program that it has active child support agency involvement. Often those child support programs are coordinating employment services in partnership with a workforce program, TANF program, or community college. And then you can see in the final map of slide 24, most states, nearly all states, are compromising state debt owed to the state under old policies that where the child support was kept by the state to repay welfare benefits. That policy is largely fading. 94% of the collections that we now make nationally go to families. Only 6% of collections are being held back by states to repay welfare costs. And so with that, let me stop, and thank you very much. Oh, let me say one more thing, which is we're in the process of changing our name. We're right now the Office of Child Support Enforcement, but we are becoming the Office of Child Support Services, and in that we follow we follow rather than lead, in that the majority of states now have a name like Child Support Services that does not include enforcement in the name.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. I appreciate your overview of child support and how it works, and especially highlighting some of the effectiveness and the tools that are being used to really increase the reliability and consistency of child support payments. So thank you. Now we're going to turn to Senator Linda Gray from Arizona. Senator Gray, thank you for joining us today. You've had a long career in the Arizona Legislature, and just want to talk with you a little bit about what you've done in your state and the role that you see for state policymakers in setting child support policy.
Well, thank you. And just as a little bit of background for everybody, I personally had to go through a divorce 30 years ago. We had an adopted 3-year-old at the time, and my husband was in law school. So I understand the heartbreak of a broken marriage and the heartbreak children experience through a divorce. And one of the things that I'm glad Arizona does is we have a law that says during a divorce that all parents have to go through a class, and hopefully a parenting type class, and understanding what benefits the child, especially if you're not arguing in front of children, those types of things. One of the laws that we had on our books was that when you go through a divorce, that the child is supposed to have the same standard of living enjoyed by the child prior to the divorce. Well, when we have 40% of those who have never been part of a marriage, this really didn't apply to them. And so we changed that law last year, especially when you have your low income to medium income. If you're dividing property and you have half the income to be able to set up households, then it becomes very difficult to meet that standard of what you had prior to a divorce. So we ended up changing that except for the high-income wage earners. One of the things that we've also done here in Arizona is that if you have a professional license or even a driver's license and you are behind in child support, that we can go after those licenses. In today's economy, that has become difficult as some of the parents have lost their job. So we have given additional months to be able to come into compliance before that license is suspended. Some of the other bills we have worked on in policy is the prohibiting interest from accruing on child support obligations that were incurred prior to the support order. We've realized that that penalty then kind of stymies being able to collect and to have a fresh start in collecting that. So that is one of the things that we have waived, that prior, the past support interest. And this has helped in encouraging parents to move forward once the order is in place and not penalizing with interest for support due before the order was in place. Another issue, we went through, we have every 4 years, the court is supposed to go through and readjust the income that is supposed to go for child support. And so we had a couple of years ago where they developed a plan called the Child Outcome-Based Support, and they brought this to the legislature through a committee we have called Domestic Relations Committee. This was established by the legislature. It's made up of legislators, judges, custodial, non-custodial parents, domestic violence people, attorneys, and child family counselors who give feedback to the legislature on what they think would help. So this group was presented with what was called the COBS, or Child Outcome-Based Support. The model attempted to address family situations with huge income disparity between the two parents. Unfortunately, there were unintended consequences, which included increasing some support orders by drastic amounts, resulting in an outcry from the public. And so, in order to address this, we asked that the court first select a nationally recognized independent research organization to review and assess the methodology that was set up in COBS. And ultimately, the court chose to keep the current model, which is called income shares, with several key updates and inflationary adjustments. So those are some of the things that we've been working on here in Arizona. Several years ago, we also included the health insurance that a judge has to determine that be applied for the children. So we've been fairly busy here in Arizona updating that. One of the most important, I think, that came about this last year is a change in terminology. We typically have had custodial, non-custodial, but we felt it very important to be having parenting time for both parents and to recognize that a child wants to be involved with the mother and the father if there's not been domestic violence. So we have gone through our statutes, re-identified, and talking more about parenting time, trying to equalize that time between the mother and the father for the child. So that is what Arizona has been up to in the past few years.
Thanks, Senator Gray. One of the other things that I was wanting to have you comment on is maybe sort of the level of attention that child support gets in the legislature. I think the child support community feels that perhaps it flies under the radar a little bit. What's your take on that? Do you see it rising to the level of importance, and that legislators are really concerned about child support?
Legislators are concerned about child support. We recognize that if both parents, if physically able, should be contributing for the benefit of the child. So even though you've had a mom who maybe has been a stay-at-home mom, that it's important for that mom to also contribute and to possibly get additional training for job improvement. So even though Arizona has set up their law to where the Supreme Court looks at the formulas for child support, I think because of our constituency and our own personal experiences, we are very concerned that a child has child support coming in.
So in terms of other states that are, and legislators who are wanting to get involved in child support, do you have any tips or advice or lessons learned along the way about working on these issues?
Well, part of it is with NCSL. When you have good model state legislation, and I think Arizona has that other states can look to NCSL to be able to give out some of that model legislation to other states.
Great. Are there other things you can do? I know we had talked earlier about some of the ways that legislators can get involved with their state programs and getting an on-the-ground view of child support.
One of the things that I did was to visit a family court judge. Also, our processing center here, I happened to be able to go just a few years after they had privatized the processing center, and it was amazing to see how quickly, once the check comes in, that they're able to process it and get the money to the parent for the child. So for new legislators especially, to ask questions, to rely upon staff who's been here maybe longer than with term limits like we have in Arizona, sometimes you have to take your own initiative. But to be able to go over to your Department of Economic Services, to actually step in and see what's going on, or to go to the processing center like I did and see how well that was working. These are some of the things that can occur in your state. But it's also up to the individual legislator to take that initiative to find out.
I think just in terms of one other point I know, and thank you for the advertisements in terms of the support that NCSL can offer, and I just wanted to remind folks too that we do have resources on our website from different publications. We have a database of all of the legislation across all the 50 states for 2012, and we'll be doing that into 2013, and also that we do have the resources to provide state-specific technical assistance and really help you delve into the details of what's going on in your own state and give you that 50-state perspective as well so that you can learn from what the other states are doing. I know Senator Gray mentioned the looking at other legislation, and we can certainly provide that as well as other program models and connecting you with some of your peers in the other states. So we are here as a resource, and our website and contact information you should see on the slide right now. And I think what we'll do is turn it over to questions at this point. And Glyme, could you remind folks how they can submit some questions? I know we've got a couple in the hopper, but for those who came on maybe a little bit later, if you could just give them the instructions on how they can submit a question.
Certainly. If you would like to submit a question or a comment at any time during the webinar, you may use the chat box located on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the send button.
So we did have one question, and it's a pretty technical one, but one of the questions came in was, what kind of arrangements have you made with non-extradition treaty countries with regards to child support? And I'm going to turn this over to Vicki and my colleagues in the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement to answer that question.
Well, thank you for the question. We live in a global world, and several years ago we realized that if we were going to ensure that U.S. children receive support from their parents, we were going to have to face up to the fact that parents move all the time. They move from state to state, and they move from country to country. We have a number of bilateral agreements, both at the federal level and at the state level, with different countries. In addition, we recently negotiated something that we call the Hague Treaty, which is a multilateral agreement where every country who can consider signing on to the agreement over time. We negotiated some rules of the road that are frankly based on the U.S. system. We're widely viewed around the world as having the most advanced child support system, and in fact our neighbors to the north say that quite readily. And so the Hague Treaty is a vehicle for encouraging other countries to work with us with systems that they develop but that are compatible with ours under the treaty. The Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement serves as the central authority, the central point of contact for parents and countries outside U.S. borders. And then we coordinate with states on establishment and enforcement activities. We get about 1% of our caseload are international cases, and very often the children are living here and the non-custodial parent is living in another country, but it can go the other way as well. We don't need to have extradition authority. We deal with this through technology and through treaty and agreement arrangements. So we don't cover every country. We have to have some sort of a treaty or bilateral agreement in place, but increasingly we're able to use our contacts around the world to help obtain child support, even if a parent is living outside of our country. I should mention also that there is legislation passed in the House. It's pending in the Senate at the U.S. level to require states to revise their interstate laws, their UIFSA laws, to conform with treaty requirements. We're still some ways down the road from that. We'll certainly work with NCSL when the time is right to ask states to update their laws. They're pretty minor changes, but they will allow for conformity with the treaty when it comes about.
Thanks, Vicki. And somewhat related, we have another question in terms of what happens if there's a support order but the child goes into out-of-home care. So if they move into a foster care situation, are there federal requirements or does it differ by state?
Both. There is when a child is in foster care, in federally funded foster care, there is a requirement that the foster care agency consider whether the case is appropriate for enforcement, and if it is, then to refer that case to the child support agency for child support activities. The foster care agency can make the judgment that the case is not appropriate for enforcement, and we've encouraged states to really pick and choose which cases come over to child support. A situation where there's a reunification plan in short term may not be the best appropriate case for child support enforcement, because the parent who is trying to prepare a home for the children to come home may end up paying money out of pocket to reimburse foster care payments. On the other hand, let's say the child's been placed in a long-term arrangement with a grandmother. That grandmother may need child support, and it may be that one or both parents can help support that child through child support. Both parents would be non-custodial. The foster care agency may then refer that case to us, and then we, meaning state agencies, may then enforce child support against both parents. If the child is in out-of-home private care, let's say grandma, the grandmother may apply for child support services on behalf of the child. And our services are available without regard to income eligibility. You get child support services automatically if you are a child referred from TANF or from foster care or from Medicaid programs. Otherwise, parents and grandparents, custodians of children can apply for our services, and for a small user fee can receive services for as long as they choose, and often that's decades, like I said. Does that answer the question? There is some judgment to be made there, but we do provide services upon request.
Great. And I think if that doesn't answer Amber's question, then please you feel free to ask a follow-up. We have some other questions as well in terms of how you can how you determine the income for self-employed non-custodial parents. I mean, when you think about the number of non-custodial parents that are working, they're not necessarily working for a company that's required to withhold those earnings. What's the process for that?
Well, that's a really good question, and this is one of our most challenging caseloads. Self-employment income is subject to child support payments and taxes, for that matter, just like any other income. For parents who are self-employed but paying taxes, having bank accounts, that we can find the source of that income. We can work out arrangements with the non-custodial parent to pay regular child support payments. The challenge is when a self-employed parent is not accurately reporting earnings to the tax system or to us, where there's an element of a cash economy or staying under the formal economy radar screen. And in that case, we do struggle to develop adequate locate sources. We look to the custodial parent for ideas. We're constantly trolling a number of databases so that if there is involvement with the formal economy in any way, we're likely to pick up the money, we're the source of the money. But if a self-employed parent is determined to stay out of sight, it's possible to do that, and we have to do very careful individual investigation of that case to try to locate the source of funds. One of those can include going to court and bringing a civil contempt hearing. But that process may work where there's income, but again, where there's actually no income or no regular income, we may not get the results that we want.
Well, there's another sort of basic question in terms of some of the trends in legislation around child support. So I think perhaps we'll just field that from our vantage point here at NCSL. And it's true that we are seeing people looking at processes to modify and look at custody and visitation orders for parents, not only just in general, but specifically looking at those who are active in the military. Military families definitely creates some unique circumstances, and so we're seeing quite a few policies that are being implemented around those family situations. The other piece is employer compliance with child support orders. Again, since that is sort of the major source and an effective way to collect child support, state legislatures are looking at ways to increase employer compliance and make that easier for employers to be able to meet those obligations. Some of the other things that we've seen are, again, around the professional license revocation and suspension rules and driver's license rules, whether that be, making it easier or less punitive, or allowing some opportunities then for individuals to be able to hold on to those licenses so that they can work and then be able to make those payments. And we've also seen a number of states that are looking at study committees, so really trying to get a handle on what's going on and what's most effective. I think, as Senator Gray alluded to earlier, in terms of what was going on in Arizona, some of the guideline issues and looking at the formulas and trying to make sure that those guidelines are addressing some of these very complex family situations that we find ourselves in. And I know Vicki talked about sort of the ideal world where, all parties are known and there's an income coming in, and those are fairly easy. But what we're finding is that there are many more complex situations, and so some states are trying to really examine and research ways to address those. So in terms of legislation, that's what we are seeing. We do have another question, and I think this may be the last one, but how successful is the recouping of money for public assistance cases? And the person is curious about how the custodial parents become self-sufficient if support is being paid to recoup the payments being made by the state for public assistance. So, Vicki, do you want to comment a little bit about that? And Senator Gray, perhaps you have some comments that you would like to add from the state perspective in terms of child support being seen as a cost recovery program for public assistance benefits. How about Senator Gray? Do you want to address it from your perspective first? You may be on mute. Oh.
Okay, this is Linda Gray from Arizona, and I'm not sure we're going after that right now, but I do feel it is important at some point to repay back the state if the money is needed currently to be able to have a house, an apartment, to be able to provide for food and other services for the child. It's the wrong time to take the money back for the state.
Okay, great. Vicki, do you want to talk about it from the more global perspective?
I do, and I appreciate the challenge that states have been under, trying to juggle services to families and other state needs for revenue with reduced revenues through taxes. And one of the things that we've seen is sort of more interest in the cost recovery role of child support in recent years. The federal law does permit states, it gives states the option to pay 100% of the money to families. So this is a state option to either pay the money to families or to hold back a portion of it to repay public assistance. I think the basic conundrum is that the non-custodial parents of children who are receiving public assistance are themselves usually poor. The mothers and the fathers usually look pretty similar in terms of income. So we have the custodial parent and child receiving assistance, and we have an effort for the non-custodial parent to pay that money back. But that money isn't there in any reliable way for the most part. And so non-custodial parents who are themselves low income, themselves not stably attached to the employment, and may not be steadily involved with their own child, are put at a disadvantage by welfare cost recovery. They are less inclined to pay child support. They are less inclined to engage with the system, and they're less inclined to be involved with their child. They run away from it. They say they don't have the money to pay their order sometimes to begin with, and then when they understand that that money goes to the state to repay welfare benefits, they are even less inclined to repay it. And although I appreciate the origin of the program as a cost recovery program, and I appreciate the need for revenues, especially at this time, the question in my mind is, what is the highest, best use of this money? And I think the research would say that the best use of this money is to allow fathers, sometimes mothers, to support their own children, to use that money to support their own children and avoid the need for as much welfare public assistance, rather than to pay public assistance and look to low-income non-custodial parents to repay that amount. It's as a practical matter, it's not going to happen to any great degree, and as a family relationship matter, it serves as one more wedge between a father and child, and one more reason not to pay child support.
Thanks, Vicki. We are coming up at the end of the time of our webinar. Vicki, did you have any last comments to make?
Well, I just simply wanted to say thank you, and also to say that the success of child support is dependent both on technology and on people. And we have some great things going on the technology side, both data mining. We have a contract here at OCSC where we're looking at the possibilities, for example, of using more data, private data sources, plumbing our data to find out more about self-employed non-custodial parents, for example, web-based services allowing parents to apply for services and get payment information. But we also depend on people, especially for cases where there are barriers to payment, that there's nothing that can substitute from a caseworker working directly with a parent, or even better yet, with both parents to try to solve problems.
Great. Senator Gray, did you have any final comments before we close this out?
Just good luck to the other legislators as they go through this year and providing for children.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us, Vicki Turetsky and Senator Linda Gray from Arizona. This has been a great overview, and I hope that those of you who are on this webinar will join us on future webinars. We'll be delving into some of the more specific innovations that states are looking at in terms of child support policy. So please contact us at NCSL. You can join our listserv and stay up to speed on all things child support. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.